Moscow is not just the capital of Russia. It is one of the largest and most influential cities in the world, a place where political power, imperial history, Soviet ambition, modern finance, and daily urban life overlap on a massive scale. Located on the Moskva River in central Russia, the city has more than 13 million residents within its official city limits. Its wider urban area holds more than 19 million people, and the metropolitan region reaches beyond 21 million. That makes Moscow the most populous city located entirely in Europe, as well as the largest urban and metropolitan area on the continent. Its scale is difficult to grasp from population alone. The city covers about 2,511 square kilometers, while the broader metropolitan area stretches across more than 26,000 square kilometers. Moscow is a capital, a megacity, a financial center, a cultural symbol, and a historical stage on which much of Russia's story has unfolded. The geography of Moscow helps explain why it became so important. The city stands on the Moskva River, a waterway that helped connect settlements, trade routes, and political centers across the Russian lands. Unlike many famous European capitals that grew near warm seas or major ocean ports, Moscow developed inland, deep in the Russian plain. This location gave it both advantages and challenges. It was protected from some maritime invasions and positioned near the heart of Russian territory, but it also faced long winters, harsh temperatures, and the logistical demands of governing a vast land empire. Today, Moscow is often described as the northernmost and coldest megacity in the world. That label is more than a climate fact. It reflects the extraordinary effort required to build and maintain a dense, modern metropolis in a region where winter is a defining part of life, architecture, infrastructure, and urban rhythm. Moscow first appears in written records in 1147, but its rise from a regional settlement to a center of power took centuries. During the medieval period, it became the capital of the Grand Principality of Moscow. This state gradually gained influence over surrounding Russian lands and played a leading role in the process of political unification. By the 15th century, Moscow was no longer merely one principality among others. It had become the core of a developing unified state. Its rulers expanded their authority, absorbed rival centers, and presented Moscow as the political and spiritual heart of the Russian world. This early rise matters because it established a pattern that would repeat throughout Moscow's history. The city was not simply a place where people lived, but a symbol of central authority. Control of Moscow meant control of the state's direction, identity, and legitimacy. In 1547, the proclamation of the Tsardom of Russia marked another major step in Moscow's evolution. The city remained the political and economic center of the country for much of its early modern history. From Moscow, Russian rulers governed an expanding territory that would eventually stretch across northern Eurasia. The city's architecture and sacred spaces reflected this growing power. The Kremlin became not just a fortress, but a seat of authority. Churches, walls, towers, and ceremonial squares helped express the idea that Moscow was the center of a grand political order. This period built many of the associations that still shape the city's global image: domes, fortifications, orthodox tradition, and state power concentrated in a single urban core. Even as Russia expanded outward, Moscow remained a symbolic anchor, representing continuity between medieval rule, religious authority, and emerging empire. Moscow's status changed dramatically under Peter the Great. In 1712, he moved the Russian capital to the newly founded city of St. Petersburg. This was not just an administrative decision. St. Petersburg was designed as a window to Europe, a planned imperial capital facing the Baltic Sea and symbolizing Russia's desire to modernize along Western lines. For Moscow, the transfer meant a decline in political importance during much of the imperial period. Yet the city did not disappear from Russian life. It remained an economic, cultural, religious, and historical center. In some ways, losing capital status strengthened its role as a guardian of older Russian identity. St. Petersburg represented imperial reform and European orientation, while Moscow continued to evoke deep-rooted tradition. This tension between old and new, inland and coastal, Russian and European facing, became one of the defining contrasts of Russian history. The Russian Revolution brought Moscow back to the center of state power. In 1918, after the establishment of the Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic, the capital was moved from St. Petersburg, then known as Petrograd, back to Moscow. The decision had practical and symbolic meaning. Moscow's inland position was considered more secure during a period of civil war and instability. At the same time, returning the capital to Moscow connected the new revolutionary government to a city with centuries of political significance. Later, Moscow became the political center of the Soviet Union. During the Soviet period, the city grew rapidly in population, infrastructure, and ideological importance. It was transformed by grand avenues, government buildings, mass housing, industrial expansion, and monumental public spaces. Moscow became the headquarters of a superpower, where decisions made in government offices affected not only Russia, but Eastern Europe, Central Asia, and the wider Cold War world. After the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, Moscow remained the capital of the Russian Federation. This continuity was important. The state changed, the ideology changed, and the economic system shifted dramatically, but Moscow retained its role as the political command center of the country. In the post-Soviet period, the city experienced continued growth and visible transformation. Markets expanded, private companies emerged, foreign brands arrived, and new financial districts began to reshape the skyline. At the same time, Moscow inherited the infrastructure, institutions, and symbolic weight of the Soviet capital. This produced a city of contrasts: Soviet-era apartment blocks beside luxury developments, historic churches near glass towers, and old state institutions operating in a newer capitalist environment. Modern Moscow is therefore not a clean break from its past. It is layered, with medieval, imperial, Soviet, and post-Soviet identities existing side by side. Moscow is governed as a federal city, meaning it functions as one of Russia's federal subjects while also serving as the national capital. This gives it a special administrative position within the country. It is the seat of the government of Russia, and the Moscow Kremlin remains one of the most recognizable centers of political power in the world. But Moscow is not only political. It is also Russia's leading economic, cultural, and scientific center, and one of the most important urban economies globally. The city has one of the highest concentrations of wealth in the world, with the second highest number of billionaires of any city, tied with Hong Kong. This wealth is visible in business districts, luxury retail, financial services, and real estate. Yet it also creates sharp contrasts between elite spaces and ordinary urban life, a common feature of global megacities but especially striking in a city so closely tied to state power. One of the clearest symbols of Moscow's modern economic ambition is the Moscow International Business Center, also known as Moscow City. This cluster of skyscrapers forms one of the largest financial centers in the world and contains many of Europe's tallest buildings. Its glass towers create a very different image from the onion domes and red brick walls usually associated with Moscow. That contrast is part of the point. Moscow City presents the capital as a modern financial hub connected to global investment, corporate headquarters, and international business culture. It also demonstrates how Moscow's skyline has changed in the 21st century. For centuries, the city's visual identity was dominated by churches, fortresses, and government structures. Today, skyscrapers signal the rise of finance and corporate power, adding another layer to a city already defined by political authority and historical symbolism. For many visitors, Moscow's most iconic image is Red Square. This public space sits beside the Kremlin and has witnessed ceremonies, military parades, political gatherings, and countless moments of national symbolism. Nearby stands St. Basil's Cathedral, famous for its colorful domes and distinctive design. Together with the Moscow Kremlin, these sites are part of the city's collection of UNESCO World Heritage landmarks. Their importance is not only architectural. They represent how Moscow communicates power and identity through space. Red Square is open, ceremonial, and theatrical. The Kremlin is fortified, official, and political. St. Basil's Cathedral adds religious and artistic character. In a single area, Moscow displays the major themes of its history, state authority, Orthodox tradition, public spectacle, and national memory. Few urban spaces in the world carry such a dense concentration of symbolism in such a recognizable visual form. Moscow's size would be impossible to manage without a vast transportation network. The city is served by 4 international airports, 10 railway terminals, trams, a monorail system, and one of the largest rapid transit systems in the world, the Moscow Metro. The metro is the busiest in Europe and is famous not only for moving millions of passengers, but also for the design of many of its stations. Some stations feel more like underground palaces than simple transit stops, with chandeliers, mosaics, marble columns, sculptures, and Soviet-era artwork. This reflects a distinctive idea of public infrastructure. In Moscow, transport was designed not only to be functional, but also to express civic pride and political ideals. Today, the metro remains essential to daily life, connecting residential districts, business centers, railway hubs, universities, and cultural sites across an enormous urban area. Despite its reputation for cold winters, heavy traffic, and dense development, Moscow is also one of the greenest major cities in the world. More than 40% of its territory is covered by greenery. Parks, boulevards, riverbanks, courtyards, and forested areas play an important role in the city's livability. This green coverage matters because megacities often struggle with air quality, heat, noise, and overcrowding. In Moscow, large green spaces help balance the intensity of urban life, especially in a city with such a large population and such a wide metropolitan footprint. The presence of greenery also adds another contrast to Moscow's identity. It is a city of skyscrapers and medieval walls, of sub-zero winters and crowded metro platforms, of financial towers and historic cathedrals, but also of parks and open spaces. That mixture is what makes Moscow more than a capital on a map. It is a layered megacity shaped by geography, power, memory, and constant reinvention. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.